Hi, thank you for tuning into HAL Hacks. My name is Cheyenne Meadows, and I'm the High Ability Learning Specialist at the Nebraska Department of Education. Today, we're going to be talking about some quick differentiation strategies that are really easy for teachers to have in their back pocket, and especially general education teachers to have when they already have existing curriculum or existing material, and this is ways that they can adjust that for high ability learners. So when we talk about differentiated, I want to really quickly just make sure that we are on the same page. Different does not mean differentiated. So if you give a high ability learner something that's longer or something that is just a little bit different than the rest, but it's not actually harder, then that's not differentiated. That's just different. When you're trying to determine if an assignment is differentiated, you want to ask yourself, could all students do this? If all the students can do it, it might not be appropriate for a high ability learner. Should all students be able to do this? If you're giving an assignment and all students should be able to do it, then it's also not appropriate for a high ability learner. And would all students want to do this? We know that high ability learners really seek that challenge, and if it's too hard for the general education classroom, the students may be discouraged and not want to do it, and that may be an appropriate challenge for the high ability learners. So we want to make sure that we're considering all these different things to make sure that the assignment is truly differentiated for our learners' high ability. So the first differentiation strategy I'm going to talk about is the simplest, and it's called the that and strategy. And what this is it takes simple questions and turns them into something more complex. So if you already, and this is great because teachers already have questions written, there are already questions in the book, and this is a really easy way to make sure we are taking it up a level for high ability learners. So it takes two or more complex elements and puts them together to engage the students in critical thinking. So it takes them from that regurgitation level or recitation level and takes it up into the more complex thinking realm. So this is an example of some questions that are modified using this strategy. So for example, a question in an ELA classroom may be create a new ending to the story. So instead of that just really easy assignment that would be for a high ability learner, kind of mundane, we can take the that and strategy and make it more complex by saying create a new end to the story that includes symbolism and develops a theme of individuality. And so we've taken that question from that kind of the basic thinking skills all the way up through to a complex thinking skill. And now they have to consider not only different elements, but how to develop them. So that makes it more complex for those students. Another example for social studies would be creating a timeline of the 1870s. And so instead of just being able to go into the book and find events and make that timeline, students can create a timeline of the 1870s that includes 3 cause and effect relationships. So they're evaluating relationships and describe how those relationships cause a shift in power over time. And so it's taking it up into that application realm and allowing students to use those critical thinking skills. And an example in science is create a model of the heart. So instead of just, again, regurgitating information from memorization, creating a model of the heart that shows function and how it impacts other body systems, making them create those connections and those relationships makes that differentiated. Another really quick strategy that we're going to talk about is this questioning grid. And this is something that just gives you question stems in order to make it more higher level thinking skills. So we want to stay out of the factual and predictive realms. Those are the realms that are usually high ability learners have down pretty well, and they find those kind of boring or they are beyond those stages. And we want to keep it in the analytical and the application synthesis realm. So when we're thinking about questions, if we go along the side, we have in the analytical thinking realm, we have questions like why can, or in application synthesis, how will. So they're making those connections between relationships and creating something new. So some examples for how to use the questioning grid. If you look at the grid and you take those question stems, you can have questions like, how might the main character in the story come up with a solution to the problem? How might you solve this problem? I am not a math person, but I tried my hand at a math question here. How are the interior and exterior angles of the triangle related? So they're creating that analytical thinking. And why should they equal 180 degrees? So they're creating synthesis of this, the explanation. How will the food web ensure balance in an ecosystem? And so that again is taking it beyond memorizing the food web, and how does it impact other systems? The last strategy we're going to discuss are called depth and complexity. And this is another really great one because it's already pre-made and teachers can just use them to supplement questions for students. So for example, these are the cards for secondary. And so what you would do is you would, in lieu of the assignment that the students are doing, if they're answering questions out of a book or if they're answering questions that are not quite higher level for them, you can give them one of these cards instead. And so the questions are already written and they're just going to be applied to whatever you're doing in class. So for example, instead of a short writing assignment, maybe you give them the ethics card and they answer those questions on the ethics that are in whatever you're working on. Or give them the multiple perspectives card, and that makes them think in different ways and be able to bring those multiple perspectives into play. This also works across all disciplines. You see trends, which some of them are better for math, such as trends, cross disciplines, language of the discipline. So these are all, again, really easy, and you can just hand them to the students or say, pick two and do them. So that's a really great strategy to use. There's also an elementary version of these cards. So these are a little more friendly language for those students and a little simpler so that they can understand them on their own, especially in places like learning centers. You could have a learning center that instead of answering the questions given, you place cards there for your high ability learners, or maybe they carry these around to their stations to answer questions that way. If you would like a copy of these depth and complexity cards, I do have them in PDF version. If you shoot me an email, I can shoot them back to you. So a lot of times strategies can be used differently, and this set of specific strategies is really great because it can be used in the general education classroom really easily. So like I said, these can be used in learning centers. For classwork or homework, you can give them some of these things instead of the general assignment. You even can use the cards for class discussion. So if in a class discussion you have high ability learners in your class, or you have a high ability learner that answers a question, maybe using the depth and complexity cards to probe them further. And you can also use this for independent assignments in place of what the other students are doing. So for example, if the other students are writing the end of the story, you give them that and assignment. You don't give them double the assignment, just in place of. Thank you for listening to this edition of HAL Hacks. Again, if you need anything, you can shoot me an email at cheyenne.meadows@nebraska.gov, and I look forward to hearing from you in the future. Thank you.